Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kayla, and we are pediatric speech language pathologists. And this is the Cheat Sheet Speech podcast,
Woohoo!
where we educate parents and caregivers on how to play intentionally in their everyday routines to promote language.
Yeah, just a reminder, this is an educational podcast, so it should not be used for medical purposes. If you have concerns about your child's speech or language, please seek an evaluation from a pediatric speech language pathologist in your state. Alrighty, what's on the docket today?
Well, today we're mixing it up a little bit, and we're going to start with our speech spotlight.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about a topic that every parent asks us about, which is screen time and its impact on language development.
Yes, this one comes up a lot in our sessions. We have parents asking us, should my child be watching Miss Rachel? Should my child be watching Bluey? How much screen time should we have? So let's break down the research and kind of see where these screen time recommendations are coming from.
Perfect. I have some research right here. So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, it is recommended no screen time for children under 2, 1 hour per day for ages 2 to 12, and 2 hours per day for teens and adults.
Yeah, these recommendations, they're tough. They're very limiting. I know I personally struggle with trying to reduce my screen time. So maybe let's look at why these recommendations are so restrictive from a language standpoint.
Right. Well, yes, screen time can have an impact on our language development. So a 2019 study in pediatrics found that for every extra hour of daily screen time, toddlers showed a significant decrease in expressive language skills. So that's huge. Every extra hour, less expressive language skills. And it kind of makes sense when we think about the why. So let's talk a little bit more about what's happening behind the screens.
Funny.
Yeah.
So first, that screen time is going to reduce that back and forth interaction, right? So that's really important for language development. If a child's like looking at a cow on that screen and they say moo, there's no one to say that back, or there's no one to expand on it and say moo, cow, I see a cow. There's no individuality with that language production there.
Right. That face-to-face, back and forth interaction allows your child to use and interpret your facial expressions, the reciprocating, and even that joint attention where thinking about something at the same time.
Yes, that kind of leads into our second point. So those back-to-back interactions are really important, but that also leads to that passive learning. That is the key difference there between those face-to-face interactions and that screen time interaction. There's more passive learning there. So those children are absorbing that language, but they're not necessarily using that language or having opportunities to use language.
Yeah, I agree with that. So they're not able to use that language. And there's so many different reasons why we use language. We call these pragmatic functions, but it's to ask questions, to make requests, to comment on what they see, or even protest and tell us no.
Yeah,
we love to hear. So your child might be able to like label what they see on the screen, but without that interaction, they're not able to do some of those other pragmatic functions of language.
Yes, screens move at their own pace. So they aren't changing things based on your child's processing time, based on what your child is saying. So definitely harder to navigate those pragmatic functions there. These characters aren't changing what they're saying in real time to individualize it to what your child has to say.
Yeah, and then there's another piece, which would be attention. So I have another research article, a 2020 study in the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics found that kids who exceed screen time recommendations are more likely to have attention difficulties by age 5.
Interesting. I mean, attention is a huge piece of language development. We need attention to work on problem-solving skills. We need attention to engage with that toy. When you're engaging with a toy for a longer period of time, then it helps build that language because there's just more language opportunities that can be created.
Right. So far we've talked about screens are impacting those interactions.
Mm-hmm.
They're also impacting that attention, which gives for more opportunity for language development. And the last thing would be really play.
Yeah.
The screens often are replacing that playtime.
Right.
And play can create a lot of opportunities for problem solving and asking for help and imagination, practicing conversations.
We're always talking about how play is important.
I love play.
And yeah, play just creates so many opportunities for language. So if it's being used as a replacement for play, obviously those language opportunities are going down. With less language opportunities, there's going to be, less opportunity for that language development. So that's the research behind the recommendations.
Right.
So let's kind of move into our weekly chatter. We usually do that first, but we're going to move right into that after this week. So what could we do, or how could we use this research to kind of take that next step here?
Yes. And so then this topic I actually was just hearing about in the news, kind of, I guess, the podcast world.
Instagram world.
Yeah. Kylie Kelsey on her Not Gonna Lie podcast was just interviewing the Miss Rachel. And they were talking about screen time and just hearing a little bit about Miss Rachel's perspective on screen time. And Kylie was sharing, like, they do use screens in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of thinking about, like, what that would look like.
Yes, I love Kylie Kelsey. She's so cute, and she's a fellow field hockey player.
We love field
hockey players.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's a great idea to kind of expand on. So, your child's already getting screen time. How can we start to make this screen time more meaningful?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So thinking about meaningful, purposeful screen time, one recommendation I would have is to pair movement with screen time.
Okay.
So I would think about, like, Daniel Dance Party, that you're moving around dancing with those as well.
Mm-hmm.
You could also have a trampoline present or one of those wobble cushions present.
Yes.
So that there's some movement happening, making it a little bit more interactive for that screen.
Right. So then your focus isn't just on that screen. You're kind of doing something else at the same time. Something else you can do is pause the show. We do this a lot in speech, not necessarily with the screens, but if we're doing music, we will pause that music and it creates that language opportunity. So for example, if you're watching or like playing like Old MacDonald, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll pause it right before that O. So E-I,
Oh.
And the kid wants to fill that in. So you're creating an anticipatory event for them to fill that in. So pausing can just create more space for a language opportunity there.
Which I guess kind of just goes with the fact that another idea is just to watch the show together. Mm-hmm. So this way, even if you're washing dishes or doing laundry, those are some of the things Kylie mentioned that she likes to do during screen time.
Right.
She just doesn't need 3 little ducklings helping her out with all those tasks. Having the screen somewhere so that you can see it too, so that you can make a comment about what the character's doing, just adds more language and context in real time.
Right. And when you pause it too, you can ask questions about what's happening, or you can also like have them make prediction questions if your child's working on that, like a little bit older. There's so much more language you can add using it as a tool to create language versus that passive learning that we talked about before. I love that idea. So the other thing you can do is work on that building receptive language piece. So I love to pair that, screen with some toys. So instead of it just being a screen passive learning, we're pairing it with some toys. So what might that look like?
So let's say you are watching some sort of farm show and you get your pig and you get your cow. And then when a pig shows up on the screen, you're like, oh, let's find our pig. There's our pig. Look, our pigs match. My pig's pink too. I'm going to make my pig jump in the mud too. So trying to have some of those moments as well.
Yeah, I love that. So fun. So the last thing I think here would be trying to make that screen time more purposeful by being intentional about what shows you're picking. There are shows that are more overstimulating than other shows. That goes back to that attention piece. So if show is more overstimulating, that can reduce your attention because you're waiting for something to happen quicker. So shows like Bluey's a little less overstimulating.
Mm-hmm.
Shows from the 90s, our days, those are less overstimulating. So trying to be intentional about what show you're picking to help create that regulation for your child.
Yeah, I think so too. So those are all some great ideas. Create some learning opportunities. We're using movement.
Mm-hmm.
We're picking some toys to integrate. We're pausing, joint attention,
Right.
interacting, and then maybe also just being a little bit more mindful about the show choices that we have. So let's say your child, you heard these recommendations,
Right.
and you're like, okay, feel like my child's getting a little bit too much screen time for what I'm comfortable with. How are there ways that we can like reduce that in the home while being realistic?
Yes. Yeah. I think first setting boundaries is probably the easiest to change there. So I don't want you to set up a reward system because then that creates this idea of that like the screen is the winner. We see this a lot in clinics that sometimes kids will come in for a speech session and then, oh, well, if you do well in speech, you get the iPad. The hard part about that is that screens are designed to be very engaging, and then there's nothing that can like beat them, if that makes sense. There's
It's
nothing
addictive.
more exciting. I mean, the same thing for us with our own screens. Nothing really beats that feeling of that engagement that you get from a screen, and that's what they're designed for. So trying to set boundaries in a way where it's not a reward. So maybe using screens only on Fridays or using screens for only 20 minutes. You can set a timer on the screen. I do that with Instagram, that it's only 30 minutes a day and then it goes off. So trying to set some boundaries.
Right. I like that too. Another thing you could do would be to have like a toy rotation. We talk about this a lot where it's like you're going to a restaurant or if you're going to the waiting room of a doctor's office, having a way to bring in new toys makes it fresh, makes it exciting. And it's again, almost like something else to look forward to. Like, oh, when I go to the doctor's office, I get to play with this. So it's just going to keep their attention a little bit more. And maybe that's what you're looking for when you introduce the screen. So it would be a good substitute.
Yeah, I love that, kind of like a replacement activity, right? So instead of you're, doing something that's, using the screen, maybe I'm going to find a toy that's also engaging, but something else to do. And I think that last piece there, we talked about movement during screens, but trying to maybe pair movement in replace of screens. So screens can actually be dysregulating because they require so much attention and they're very overstimulating. That those changes in attention. So, trying to pick more of a regulatory activity that could look like going for a walk, wall pushes. I know our OT friends are always talking about wall pushes.
Walks.
Yes, crab walks, something after school to help regulate their body. And then, in replace of that screen, I think a lot of times we as adults and, I think parents think that screens are a decompressor when actually they can be that overstimulating. So trying to look into some decompressing activities.
Yeah, that's great. So we're thinking about maybe setting some boundaries, incorporating movement, and then having that toy rotation as well. Great ways to try to reduce that screen time. And that brings us right into our communication countdown for the week, talking about toys. What are some toys that you think a child might engage in a longer period of time for, so that maybe you don't have to supervise them as much? So it gives kind of that same purpose as a screen, but it's a toy and it's interactive.
Yes, so I made a list for us and I broke it up by age group. So first up for your like 1-ish-year-olds, I love the Leapfrog book. We actually got this one for our niece when she was around probably 14 months. Not we did, Mom did.
Oh,
shout out Mom. She got her the Leapfrog book and I think she loved it. But that is, it's a book when you press like there's an animals page, I think there's like a weather page, and when you press that picture, it provides that auditory feedback, honestly similar to an AAC device would. So you're going to press it and hear that sound of whatever that word is. So you press it, the monkey, it's going to say monkey out. It's engaging. There's a lot of pages. They can practice that page turning, but they're hearing that vocabulary. So I really like that one. For our younger toddlers, I recommended the Tony box. That is what we got her for Christmas. And a lot of my patients have it. They love it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it because it builds autonomy. They can change. So it's a music box basically, and you have characters on top. There's your classic Disney characters. So those all have the Disney songs. And then there's also like fables, nursery rhymes,
bedtime stories.
Yep, bedtime stories where, a parent can record the story, which I think is super cute.
Yes.
But it creates this autonomy because the child can choose which character they want, and then you can hit the side and change which story it is within that character. And so it's engaging a long period of time, and they can really do it themselves.
Yeah.
For your older toddlers, you actually recommended this one, which I thought was super cute. I hadn't seen it.
Somewhere someone was using it with their kid. It was super cute.
Yeah, the projector. So similar to a screen.
Yeah.
It's kind of also similar to the Tony box. So you put, a character on top, and it's going to project that story. But instead of it being a screen, it's a story. They're telling that story for you. So it's slower pace, which is what we're looking for, to be less overstimulating, but still building that vocabulary.
And it has the words up on the screen. So it really does look like a storybook as you're going along.
Which is great for, some of those pre-literacy skills. You're able to see the words on the page. Love that. And then for our preschool age friends, anything that involves building, problem solving. Yeah. So I linked a Lego set. I linked one that was a little bit less involved. So a child might be able to complete that on their own. But I know kids who do those like long, extensive. One of mine has a pirate ship, and it's so cute. But I'm like, how many hours did that take?
I see them like in the background, and I tell the kids, I'm like, oh, there's another one. There's a spaceship. There's
kids.
But it's very popular.
Yeah, kids love them, and they're engaging for a long time. But that could even look like, building like a flower garden, anything building where it takes a little bit more time, more engagement, and just focusing on following directions, sequencing, and problem solving skills. So we love any of those building toys.
Yeah. And then they can turn into pretend play objects at the end too. That's great. Thanks for going over our top 5 countdown of the week. Yep. We talked a lot about screen time, ways to make it purposeful, but then also ways to reduce it in your home if that's also what you're trying to do. And that is a wrap on this week on the Cheat Sheet podcast.
Yeah, I'll link all those toys in our comments, so you can just use those Amazon links right over to those if you're interested in any of those. And yes, subscribe, like. We're going to have some more everyday topics and things in the speech spotlight to go over.
Yeah, always let us know if you have a topic suggestion, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.